So internet kind of 101. So when most people think of internet, there's a few components that people look at. There's your internet speed, there's your latency, and those are really the two big things. So most people, when you think of internet, you think of what most people call speed, which is actually their bandwidth, which is a little misleading. So your internet speed is basically that volume of information transferred through a connection. So it's really the size of the pipe or your bandwidth. You might have like 100 meg by 10 meg or 250 by 50. And a lot of times when people, they'll kind of say, oh, my, I always need more bandwidth. But if you're just doing some general emailing, if you're doing general surfing, if you don't have a lot of employees, you probably don't need a ton of bandwidth. But now as you increase applications or you go to like Zoom calls, you go to live meetings, live streaming, you start going to, if you have servers on site or you're using remote applications like Office 365 or any of those things, now your bandwidth needs increase because it's just the amount of information that you can put through that pipe. And then the second component, which is probably even more important, is the latency. And the latency is actually the speed at which all that information transfers through that pipe. So latency is typically measured in milliseconds. So the lower the number, the better. And it's usually a component that people never think of. People say, I've got internet issues, my internet's slow or it's bogging down. And you call your service provider and the first thing they tell you is, well, you need more bandwidth. And sometimes that's true, but it's not always the case. A lot of times it's the latency that is, I guess, the culprit. So for instance, if you're, and you'll notice this, if you do a lot of Zoom calls, if you're using like voice over IP technologies for your phone system and you're pushing your calls through the internet, with latency, the higher the latency, the worse it is. So as your latency increases, you'll notice choppy Zoom calls. You'll notice, your live streams cutting out. If you're on phone calls, you might get dropped calls. You might get garbled calls. That's all a component of latency. It's just that the latency is too high and it's not able to process that information fast enough for quality real-time information. So those are the two big things right there. You can kind of think of it this way, I guess. Your bandwidth or your bandwidth is actually, if you think of it as a highway, if you have 100 meg, say that's a 3-lane highway. If it's 200 meg, that's your 6-lane highway. That's the bulk of information you can pass through. And then that latency component is kind of the speed limiter, the speed that it's going to allow you to get all that information through that pipe. So the lower the latency, the better. And I guess obviously more the bandwidth, the better too. But that latency, as soon as that gets high, that's where you run into issues. And a lot of people, they'll go to like a speedtest.net, just to say, hey, what is my bandwidth? And they look and they say, okay, it's 80 by 8. But there's another component. When you look at that speedtest.net, it'll give you a ping or a latency. And that's a real number that you want to also look at, because that is the speed that information flies. And most times that's more important than the actual bandwidth. And then just down below that, we have, a fast connection will transfer more data in that set amount of time than a slower connection. And I guess I kind of talked about that. But that's where it really does matter is, the more applications you're doing, the more employees you have, the more content that's in that information, the bigger the files. That's where that latency really becomes important, as well as the bandwidth. And then when we look at a couple other things too, part of that bandwidth or the components of that is your upload versus your download speed. So the download speed is the speed at which data travels from the internet to your device. Your upload is actually your information going from your building out to the world. And when you look at the download and the upload, I mean, years ago, that's what people say. You know, you ask them, what do you have for internet bandwidth? Oh, I've got 100 meg, or I've got 200 meg. And that's only part of the picture. So the download, what we find with most businesses, when we're talking to them, download speed is always fine. You know, when they're pulling information down, it's rare that that's typically compromised. But as things have changed over the years, especially over the last 6, 7, 8 years, as people have started using more of those, you know, like Office 365, having remote workers, people who have to access servers on site or virtual servers, that's where that upload speed has become more prevalent. So when you're downloading, this is kind of how I usually think of it, but if you have a remote worker at home and they have a 100 meg by 10 meg connection, and you're at work and you've got a 100 meg by 10 meg connection, and you've got a server on site at your office, and that remote worker is trying to connect into your building, people are like, oh, I've got 100 meg that I'm pushing, that I have for my internet at my business. But that person who's working remotely, they're regulated to that 10 meg. That's the max they're going to get because that's their upload speed. That's as fast as they can push stuff out. And then from your business, where they're trying to access information from that server, the fastest it can come out of there is that 10 meg. So that's where your upload speed becomes really prevalent. And again, especially in the last year for sure, as people have become remote, that's where it's really important. So if you have people working from home or working from remotely and they're saying, you know, I don't get it. I can't get the information. My stuff is so slow. That's usually the culprit right there. It's the upload speed at the business that's the bottleneck. And that's one of the big things that, especially in the last year, we've really had to address. People are typically going to more symmetric internet connections, you know, 150 by 150, or even if they're still using asymmetric, where it might be 250 by 50 or whatever that case is, there's a big push for that upload speed. People are starting to see that that's a real issue for businesses today. And then traditionally, internet technology, again, it's always focused on those download speeds. And, you know, as our slide says, you know, at home, it's fine. Most people, it's kids gaming. They might be at virtual school. But usually at home, you know, there's not a huge applications unless you are one of those gamers or stuff, or downloading music. And again, it's downloading, you know, Netflix or whatever the case is, but there's very little information typically going out. Businesses, again, much more interactive applications, much more, and in your business, quite frankly, it relies on quality connections, right? Like even us on our Zoom call today, we definitely want to have a good, clear picture. And if you have a compromised upload, that becomes challenging. And then kind of Internet 101 here. A little bit of a history of the internet, but if you're as old as I am, I was actually working in this industry when the internet first became a thing. And I remember I used to work at Schneider Communications, and we'd sell internet connectivity by a bundle. You could buy 20 minutes of internet connection for a month for $10 or something like that. And you'd log into it over your 56K analog phone line from your house, right? And maybe you get 28K, maybe you get 64K. But I remember when I first got the internet at my home, I got all excited. I actually needed a new car. A few of the dealerships were early adapters. They had their inventory on the screens. And I remember I went over to the internet, clicked on one of the cars, and it took 10 minutes to download. That's your 56K. Today, it's a little more common. You'll see 100 meg by 10 meg is a common bandwidth that we see today. That's soon going by the wayside. People are needing more and more than that. But if you look at it, from 20 or 15 years ago, from 56K or kilobits is a measurement of it. 100 megabits is 1,000 kilobits. So that's kind of even a standard for today that's going away. But then as soon as you get up, you can get into a gigabit, which is, 10 times 100 meg, it's 1,000 megabits. The bandwidth needs, and we see people needing that today. So that's kind of how it kind of lays out, just keep the bandwidth needs, just keep increasing, the speed increases. That's the direction we're going. And these are just some types of internet connections that are out there. So you can look at a DSL, which is kind of becoming an antiquated technology. You'll still see it in rural markets for the most part, where it's just too spread out and people don't want to build out their infrastructure because it's too costly. But with DSL, it kind of looks like a phone line, but the wiring inside allows for internet transmission. Again, it's typically provided by a phone company. Speeds are dependent upon your proximity to a switch or to a network, I guess. The closer you are, the faster it can be. A typical DSL, you might see 5 meg by 768K, or if it's really good, maybe 12 meg by 1 meg. But it's a pretty limited service, but for some people, that's all they can get at this point. And then you have the cable and the coax companies, and they use same cables that transmit their TV, and then it's typically always faster than DSL. And it's pretty much widely available. The speeds are dependent on usage rates by others in the areas. And you can see slowdowns during peak times as well as high latency. With the coax and the cable, it's typically a shared network. So a lot of times, if it's oversubscribed and you're in a residential area, you might find at 3 p.m. when the kids are off of school, all of a sudden your bandwidth starts to lag, or the performance of your connection starts to lag. So that can be because it's oversubscribed. It can be because of latency. But it's all transmitted with electrical signals, and it's subject to interference there as well. And then we also have the fiber optic, which this is the infrastructure. It's capable of the highest speeds possible, right? So it's very little latency. It flows over long distances. There's really no degradation at all. You can push that as far as you need to. Transmits data with light, not electricity. So you can think of it, every user is using a different spectrum of the light or the rainbow almost. So as fast as light can blink, that's as fast as everything is moving. It's a very clean or green technology. It's more resistant to electrical interference and corrosion. So there's a lot of benefits to the fiber. And with TDS, we actually offer all 3 of these services in different markets. So we've got small rural communities where we provide DSL services. It's the old analog network, and to upgrade it is costly. So, it's kind of that DSL scenario for a lot of people. We also own cable companies. We've got 3 or 4 cable companies that we own throughout the United States. And then with the fiber optic, that's something that we're really going to. I think Stephen's Point, I'm going to say it's maybe our 10th or 11th market where we're doing this in, where we have the huge fiber overlay. And with that fiber scenario, I mean, it's the most stable, it's the most reliable type of service you can get. And so for Stephen's Point, it's I mean, it's a great thing. It's you know, we put some money into the network here, and yeah. Oh, thanks, Nick. Sorry. Yeah, so this is what we put into Stevens Point. And with that fiber network, it allows us the opportunity to bring in both, I'm going to call non-dedicated internet services, dedicated internet services, phone services, whether that looks like analog lines, SIP trunking, PRI, our hosted phone system and services, TV, and transport. So if you needed to connect two locations together and have that direct connectivity, we can provide that as well. We can bring in, and again, with that fiber, right, there's no distance limitations. You can push a ton of bandwidth through there. There's not a lot of limitations at all. So even on the our non-dedicated internet side, we can deliver up to 1 gig of bandwidth, which is, I mean, 3 years ago was pretty much unheard of. We can also provide up to 10 gig by 10 gig on dedicated access. It'd be rare to see a small business that might use that, but we've, you know, got a lot of medical facilities and other companies like that who are definitely pushing those amounts of data. The entire network through Stevens Point, it's all fiber optic. For the most part, it's all underground, so it's all protected. And again, it's the highest class of service you can get through a phone company. And with the way we're delivering it, we can do it at a pretty economical cost for the consumers. And again, it's very reliable, secure, and yeah, one of the best services you can get. The nice thing too with our network, our network is monitored 24/7, 365. And that's not just our network in Stevens Point, but that's our network throughout the United States. I don't know if if you can refer to this that way anymore, but you know, when we go down to our corporate office in Madison, I always refer to it as the war room, because when you walk into it, it's like a big 2-story map of the United States, and it's got our whole network on it, and you see all these blinking lights all over the place. And the network is designed where, you know, if something goes wrong, we immediately know, we're working on it, and that's in any area of the United States. And it actually even does some self-monitoring where it can go and it can detect issues before they even happen, before they become customer affecting, which is, and it's been a few years since I've been in there, but every time I go in there, it's just impressive to look at. It reminds me of like the people when NASA launches a probe or something, and you see everybody sitting there and they're all looking at the map. Oh, and then it goes down. Yeah, so it's real-time identification, support of network issues. And, you know, I can even take this a little step further, because even with, I just wanted to touch on just even some, no, I'm not even going to do that. Never mind. Go ahead, Nick.
Sure.
All right.
So, you know, how's the pandemic changed the way we work? And I don't think this is anything new to anybody, but you know, the internet created a bit of a monster in the sense that our interactions are up, but they're not in person. So if we look at, you know, purchasing habits of consumers, we know more now than ever. One I always think of is buying a car. I mean, you never bought a car without test driving and negotiating. And now it's not uncommon to know everything you need to know and buy it online and get it delivered to your door. So consumers are knowing more about your businesses than ever, and they're doing it from the internet, from home or wherever, good or bad. And when it comes to working, we're seeing the same thing. The trends are actually more interaction, more meetings, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is with companies with remote workers, there's a huge fear of losing that company culture. So there's a lot of focus on continuing to bring people together, even if it is over Zoom, to make sure that that culture can maintain. So if and when folks do return to the office, we can pick up where it was left off. And then just the ease of use. So, I think about customer meetings in the past, and you go into the boardroom or the conference room, and there's the elaborate setup of the cameras mounted to the wall, the speakers in the ceiling, the large pod style conference phone in the middle of the table. And it was a big production to set up some type of remote meeting. And now, look at us all here. I'm sitting in my basement and I logged on 2 minutes before, and here we are. So it's just so much easier that the number of meetings that folks are holding is actually up than what it had been. And then there's been a huge shift, although it was building, as Scott mentioned, but it's really taken off, this shift towards cloud-based services. So what does that mean? You're using a service that you're accessing through the internet rather than accessing through a device in your home or in your business. And the reason for that's pretty simple, that you need to be able to conduct business no matter where you're at. Home, sometimes vacations, in the office, it all needs to look and feel the same. So this shift towards using the internet to access anything you need to do to conduct business has really taken off, which is no surprise. And then, back to kind of creating this monster with the internet, the talent locations expanded for businesses. It's no longer that I need to be in Stevens Point or I need to be in Appleton or Madison to work for a business that's located there. It could really be located anywhere, which is great because it opens up the talent pool for businesses. But the trade-off with that is your level of competition has greatly increased. Now you're competing with businesses potentially nationwide or region-wide, as opposed to just within our own communities. We've seen a big shift with that, and it's actually driven a lot of TDS's expansion, particularly in the western part of the United States. Because of the shift in remote working, there's been somewhat of an exodus from the cities. So, looking at the West Coast, like the Los Angeles area, the San Francisco area, the cost of living is so great that folks are now moving a little bit east into, Montana, Idaho, Colorado. So as we look to do similar projects to what we're doing in Stevens Point, we're kind of eyeing the western part of the United States because that workforce has shifted and are now moving into those smaller communities rather than living in the big cities. And then the other thing companies are, I would say, struggling with is the idea of the hybrid workforce. So I think it's fairly easy when a company can say, well, these people are in and these people are out, or even on a rotational basis, to keep some distancing, we're going to rotate and have, employees with the names A through K be in, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and L through Z in Tuesday, Thursday. But the reality is that it's much more flexible, or I guess the need for that is much greater. So a company can't say, I'm going to plan these resources for people in the office and these resources for people out, because it changes almost daily. And some of that is just employee needs. So the expectation of working from home has shifted a bit, where a lot of people, not everyone, but many are enjoying that. An employer needs to be able to be adaptable to say, I want to attract you or keep you within my organization. I need to provide that flexibility. So, businesses are struggling a bit coming up with those tools as well as policies to say, how do I manage that hybrid workforce? And Scott will touch on in just a bit a couple of those tools you can look to integrate and keep that flexibility. And then, Scott touched on most of these points here, so I'll just go briefly of businesses really focusing more on those numbers as we talk about internet speed, the ones we don't always see in our advertisements that upload the latency. But then the last point there, which has really shifted, is this competition for bandwidth. So traditionally, businesses operated, let's say 8 to 5, and then everybody went home. So if you look at a company like TDS, if you look at our network and internet usage, it kind of stayed balanced because at home it would drop during the day and pick up for businesses, and then it would see the inverse of that at night. But now those lines are completely blurred. With more work at home, virtual schooling, if we look at our network usage during, a Wednesday morning, it's going to look similar to what a Saturday is. Because if you think of internet usage, the residential customers drive most of that. And a lot of that's video streaming. I think somewhere around, if you look at an average night, somewhere around 80% of our network traffic is just video. So that utilization has shifted, where now it's kind of happening all day. And then, some businesses are saying, well, Scott touched on the fluctuation a little bit of, its slowdowns. A number of businesses are considering and then opting to pay for a more dedicated path to the internet. So I don't want to share with my neighbors. I need that real-time access all the time, no matter what day or night. So they're opting to purchase a more direct path to the internet so they can bypass some of that other traffic, because we've seen that blurring of internet usage between day and night. Scott, you want to take these last couple?
Look at me go. All right. How can you keep mobile or remote staff connected with customers? And that's kind of been a big challenge that we've seen, especially as companies over the years have done that. We've just become a more mobile society in general, and especially in the last year, as businesses have pushed people to their homes or working away. It's a challenge for businesses. It's like when your customers call in, it's the most important, I guess, asset that you have. And how do you make their experience great from a telephony standpoint to make sure that one, your remote employees are engaged, I guess the people who are out in the field are engaged, and that your customers can be taken care of. So one of the things that is really important and that we have done here at TDS is you really want the technology needs to look and feel similar no matter where you're interacting with your coworkers or customers. So one of the things that we found is as people become more remote, phone voice has reemerged as more of a critical technology for businesses. So in the past, a lot of stuff was internet driven, which it still is. But now from a telephony standpoint, you really want to keep people connected as well. So I'm just trying to think here, but yeah, so one of the things that we offer is there's a lot of different VoIP systems out there, or voice over IP systems. We also offer hosted phone systems, but it's probably one of the most unique ways to keep everybody connected. You can keep, basically everybody has the same equipment at places. Oh, here we go. How can look at that? But you can keep them all on the same platform, give them all the same functionality. basically you can have an employee in California and an employee in a corporate office in Stevens Point. And from a telephony standpoint, it's like that employee in California is sitting in the same four walls with you here in Stevens Point. So when your customers call in and they're looking for somebody, you can seamlessly transfer them. You can basically to their cell phones, to their desk phones. You can see if those people are available or unavailable for calls. Gives you some monitoring capabilities. But when those customers call in or, they're hoping to spend money or do whatever the case is, from their perspective, that support person or that salesperson is sitting right in Stevens Point, right next to whoever answered that phone, when in reality they could be anywhere in the United States. It's a really unique solution in that regard. But I'll just read through. But so, the customer calls, you can get them to the correct employees, the right locations, make sure that their questions are getting addressed. Because a lot of customers, quite frankly, internet is the main thing for a lot of people, but if they have a challenge or an issue and they need immediate attention, they want to talk to somebody. Especially for me, I'll say it again, I'm old. I don't like sending emails. If it's more than 10 emails, I'm out. But if I can pick up the phone and call somebody immediately, perfect. That's all I want. I just want to know somebody heard what's going on and that it's being addressed. And with the hosted phone systems, it gives you the ability to do that, to make sure that those customers are cared for. And again, allows you to transfer calls seamlessly. You can see the status of your coworkers. So call comes in, they're looking for Bill. Even if Bill's in Arizona, you can see his phone. You can see if he's on the phone, off the phone, or not available. But you can just transfer that call right to him. You can even intercom over to him to introduce the call if you wanted to. It's just like he's sitting in the same four walls. We can also incorporate this to mobile workers on cell phones, because everything, we offer applications that can be downloaded to your cell phone, your computer, your iPhone. And essentially that app or that soft phone gives you the same capabilities that you would have on your desk phone. So one of the challenges that a lot of people have is, even if a call comes into your corporate office, today you might be able to forward a call to a cell phone, or you might be able to, maybe you can transfer a call to a cell phone, but once it hits that cell phone, then that call it's connected to that cell phone and you can't do anything with it. So with the app, it basically gives you that same capability as your desk phone. When that call's transferred, now that app gives you the ability to transfer calls back to the corporate office or anywhere, which is something you can't do with a cell phone. It even gives you, presence, so you can see who's on the phone and off the phone, or in do not disturb. It just gives you a lot of those capabilities. It even gives you the ability to make calls from that app and outpulse your main work number, so not everybody's getting your cell phone number in the real world, which we find is important for a lot of people, because they don't want to be working 24/7. They want to be working 8 to 5. So it gives them much more control over their days. And that, oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. And then we do allow for, with the hosted system, it allows for reporting on customer communications. We can do some things. So a lot of times with business owners, you have remote employees and you're like, well, boy, are people really taking calls, or what are they doing? With the hosted system, you can actually look at that, and you can see, okay, who's answering calls? How many calls are people getting during a day, during a time frame? It gives you some real information that you can use to, to help manage your staff and manage your employees. Okay, now you can go.
Pretty tough to read. Just covers what you discussed before.
Okay. Do you want me to read through this? Okay. And this just gives us a little bit about our business solutions, with the internet access. Again, with that fiber, we can bring in up to a gigabit of dedicated, up to a gigabit of non-dedicated internet, up to 10 meg by 10 meg of dedicated internet, voice services. Not only can we do the hosted solution where, I mean, basically that's the way most people are going these days, but we can also provide services to support your current phone systems, whether that's analog devices, ISDN PRIs, SIP trunking, and then again, our all-inclusive voice over IP. But really, whatever you have for a phone system today, or whatever you think you want to move to down the road, we can help out with that. We've got the voice services to connect to that. And then again, our hosted and managed, our voice over IP service is hosted and managed by TDS. It includes all of your local long distance, your features, your phones. It includes all the support, 24/7 support. There's no upfront capital cost to it. It's a really unique solution. You never have to worry about surprise vendor bills or anything like that. It's just a monthly fee. It's managed by TDS. It's only basically takes that whole telephony network off your plate, so you don't have to worry about it. Some of the other products that we can also offer is our Metro Ethernet, which is for connecting multiple locations. So when you need dedicated connectivity between, we see it a lot with hospitals, paper mills, even insurance agencies with multiple locations throughout the United States. They need that direct connection to each of their other locations so they can seamlessly transfer data back and forth and without any congestion. So that's what that would give them. And then we also offer TDS. We offer TV for businesses as well in the Stevens Point area. And we've got several different package lineups for that. Depending on what you're looking for, we can kind of put different things together for you.
So to sum up, your internet connection is really the foundation of the experience your employees and customers have. So you can have all the best practices, ideas, product, people, but if your internet connection is failing you, it's tough to get that message across. Scott covered the number of factors that can affect your internet connection, or what's important, what numbers should you pay attention to. It's not always what's on the advertisements. So the type of connection you have, neighborhood you're in, what your upload speed is, that latency number can impact that quality connection. So with all the emphasis on internet though, phone still is a critical component to businesses. And being able to integrate employees no matter where they're at, in full-time, out full-time, or hybrid, making sure a customer in a way doesn't know where the person they're speaking to is located. And then what's next? I don't know if any of us knows. But the thing with the fiber network that we're building and have built in Stevens Point, it really sets us up well to handle that unknown question. So, fiber is essentially infinitely scalable. So whatever application comes along in the next 10 years that we are not even thinking about right now, most likely fiber can help accommodate whatever it is that application is. And that does it for what we have to go over.
Thank you, Scott and Nick. We do have a couple questions in the chat that I'd like to read off to you if you could address. Let me just pull these up. Can you give an overview of cellular internet and satellite internet and the impact of Starlink?
Yeah, so satellite internet, we see that is more of well, depending who you are, opportunity if you're a consumer, threat if you're a provider for rural areas. Those require line of sight, which in rural areas is not a problem. Be able to see the southern sky, but in more urban areas, that's tricky. Those are starting to push higher and higher speeds. The one trade-off with satellite, however, is the issue of latency. So, Scott mentioned the amount of time it takes for your data to get from point A to point B and back is an issue because your internet is beaming up into space and then back down somewhere else. So as you look at applications such as voice and video, it's a little bit trickier with satellite. Cellular is interesting too. The one challenge with cellular is that to push the really high speeds that might compete with, say, fiber optics, the density of the towers has to be really close. So, if you think of, I don't know what a cellular tower typically covers in terms of square mileage, but to get the speeds that might compete with fiber, you're looking at a transmitter on every block. Now, it's not a gigantic tower every block, but it's mounted somewhere. So the benefit, though, is that it can kind of connect, it's mobile. So as you're walking around, you're getting those incredibly high speeds. But the trade-off is it's tough to make a play for a cellular provider to do that outside of a really urban area, what I call kind of the NFL cities, Minneapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee, those types of things. But both certainly viable technologies, just like everything, has some benefits and trade-offs.
Thanks, Nick. Next question, how does a business best equip their associates to be fully functional when their associates are working out of a vehicle? What are best practices for the associates working from their vehicle given this current technology?
Well, I think that's an interesting one with vehicle, but it really applies to everybody is really knowing what your technology is and who's providing it. So the last thing you want to happen is somebody out on the road not being able to, something as simple as get logged into whatever application they're using. So say it's the TDS managed IP phone service. I'm using that. I'm on the road visiting customers and also making prospecting calls in between meetings. If I can't get logged in, something simple like that, get logged into my service, what good is that type of technology? So we've seen a need for employers to really arm their employees with all the information, which includes how to troubleshoot, how to get support. Can the employee call the provider directly? Are they authorized? Or do they need to work through the home office, so to speak, to get some support? So the tools are all there. We've just seen the challenge is making sure that the workforce is trained on how to utilize them all. Because like anything, all the best ideas, doesn't really make any difference if the employee isn't comfortable using the technology.
Thanks, Nick. How much coverage does TDS serve throughout north central Wisconsin?
So we are in the process of building and nearly complete with Stevens Point, as well as the Wausau area. So Rothschild, Schofield, Weston, Wausau. We've also extended our fiber network through Mosinee and also extended it west, which I guess would still fall north central, would be like the Medford area. So our focus is really on looking at those communities that are what we call underserved. So, is there multiple competitors or just one or two? And what we've been doing more and more of lately is working with those smaller communities where perhaps we are the only option, and being able to upgrade those networks. So we really have seen it as providing a necessity as opposed to just I guess, a benefit. So we're really not looking to look at a community and say, well, where else are you going to go? So we're not going to invest in the technology to support that community. We just don't see that as an option. So we are starting to do projects similar to what we're doing in Stevens Point in smaller and smaller communities, because it's just become such a necessity. And if those communities can't retain their residents because they don't have a viable internet option, then those communities really struggle.
Question for Scott. You've been in this business for quite a while and have shared with the group what the internet used to be like. What is your prediction for the future of fiber? Is it here to stay?
Fiber? Yeah, fiber's definitely not going to go away. That's going to be the wave of the future for everything. Over the years, we just keep seeing that with people needing more and more bandwidth. Fiber is the best technology for being able to I guess, push more bandwidth and get more bandwidth. So yeah, it'll I can't say never go away, but there's a huge push for that in almost every market. People want that fiber in because you can better service the building or the businesses and the community for internet bandwidth.
Yeah, the ceiling really is not identified yet. With other types of technology, a ceiling is identified, and then the question is, how fast are we going to get there? And with fiber, that mark really just keeps moving. 100 gig is starting to be more common for really, really large enterprises or providers. Scott was just talking about checking out cars with dial-up, relatively not that long ago.
Let's see. What is the best solution for rural customers who need high-speed, low-latency internet?
Well, the best solution is fiber, but if you think about a provider like TDS or really anybody, the cost to build it. So if you translate that into Stevens Point and say I'm going to build a half-mile of fiber, I might pass 100 homes. In a rural area, my cost to build that fiber is nearly the same, but I might pass 3 homes. So it's not feasible to try to get a return on that investment. But what we are seeing happening is more and more subsidization from the state and federal government for providers to be able to bolster up those rural types of connections. And then the other is satellite. And we talked about some of the challenges with latency with that, but in some parts of the state, some parts of the country, that's virtually all there is. And then, cellular is another option, but again, dependent upon, coverage. And traditionally in rural areas, it's not as strong as more populated areas for the same types of reasons. It costs the same amount of money for a provider to put up a tower, and how many subscribers are they going to connect to with that investment? So if you read through the news with stimulus packages, I don't think that's going to slow down with the funding that's going to go towards broadband. And that's either, we see it a lot of public-private type of partnerships, but I don't think it's going to be exclusively that. It could be just public type of investments, where a community bands together and makes that investment with the help of the subsidy.
Nick, I think this is a question we had. What about the service in the Fox Valley? I think this is part of the question about how much coverage does TDS serve throughout north central Wisconsin?
Sure. Yeah, so that as we look at Wisconsin, the Fox Valley or Fox Cities area is our next target that we have started construction on, doing a, really mirroring what we've done in Stevens Point, where we've identified the Fox Cities around Appleton as being an area that makes sense for us to invest in. So we are building out a fiber optic network in this area as well, which is where I'm located, and I keep my fingers crossed that it also covers my home.
Good. Okay. Scott, Nick, anything else?
No, we just, we really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this morning's meeting, and Stevens Point has been very kind to TDS, and we really just appreciate opportunities we've been given, and just thanks for all the support you've shown towards TDS as well.
And we thank you. We thank you for being here. We thank you for presenting. Thank our audience for the great questions and feedback. Our next business exchange is May 12th. And I think Jeff is on the Zoom call this morning from Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So he is going to be presenting personal growth for young leaders. So watch for more details to come. Again, that is May 12th. We have business after hours on Monday at Whitetail Lanes Bar and Grill in Amherst. We'd love to see you out there 5 until 7. I'll be getting another email reminder out tomorrow regarding that. Todd, anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you to TDS. And I know this is a challenging topic, and we appreciate what you're doing. And broadband's so important for living and working and playing in all different parts of our life. So thank you. I will add one little nugget to Monday's Business After Hours. You'll get a chance to see Karen Bowl on Monday night out at Whitetail Lane. So if you come on out, she promised that she would bowl. So that'll be worth the price of admission, which is free.
I never promised that, Todd.
I think you did.
All right. Well, thanks again to Nick and Scott, to TDS for their sponsorship of this program. Have a great day. Let's get that sun out and the snow melted. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.